The origin of religion has a deep and complicated history. Some say it came from a greater power teaching us the way of life, but in my personal opinion, it is also a way for some people to just live, to get through every day knowing things are gonna be okay. When your salvation is always at the reach of your hands, how could you not have the power to surpass the expectations society has? And the reason I bring up religion is because in this episode we see the genesis of Rudius' religion. So we open the episode with Rudius praying to the undergarments of the lady who saved him, and then we transfer to his father trying to get some. However, they are both distracted by Rudius coming outside. They bring up how they thought Rudius was sickly because he never cried and he never really went outside. So they're very happy to see him here. Rudius mentions how he wants to be able to carry the Grey Rat legacy, and so he tries his best to use his power to only protect the weak. However, he does tease his father about how he normally uses it to impress girls. However, his father is happy that he got the correct message across, and he asks Rudy to go out there and get a few girlfriends. Then Paul brings worry that he thinks he might not be able to be a good enough father for Rudy, very important for this specific episode. Then we get a beautiful montage of Rudy finally going outside of his own, even saying hi to some of the townsfolks. Rudius randomly stumbles upon a victim getting bullied here. At first he just kind of watches hiding behind a tree, but then when he sees one of the bullies picked up an actual rock to throw at the victim, he steps up. I feel this must have been difficult for Rudy. I mean, he looks slightly nervous, and when he calls out the bullies, he's actually looking at a different direction from them. I mean, it makes sense this would be difficult for him. That's probably why he hesitated at first. He was pretty much a shut until very recently. With his combat training and his magic, he easily deals with the bullies shooting water at them. He walks up to the victim and notices that it's a very handsome boy. He even thinks to himself how he's probably going to be very popular with ladies. Regardless, he helps the victim wash off. With how timid the victim acts, he even thinks he would be a guy magnet. Whenever the victim finally removes their hoodie that they were using to protect themselves, Rudy finds out that they have green hair. Remember those horror stories Roxy told him about the Superb with the green hair and the red gem in their forehead? Well, he quickly goes to check if they have a red gem, and luckily, they do not. Rudius asks the victim if they are a demon as well because of their uniquely colored hair. However, the victim replies that they are not aware. Apparently not even their parents know, so I can only assume the victim was adopted. The victim points out how their father is half elf and their mother is human. However, their hair does not match either of their color, and this devastates him. I feel Roxy may have also suffered from discrimination like this because she also gets mistaken for a Superb sometimes. Anyways, back to Rudius and the victim. Rudius proclaims that the victim is now his friend. Rudius also mentions about how by sticking with this handsome guy, he might be able to get some girls to look his direction. Regardless, they finally get to introduction, Sam proclaiming himself to be Rudius, and the victim finally gets a name, Soph. As a gust of wind flies by, they both finally decide to get together and play, and they talk about how neither of them have had friends before. Not only do they have that in common, but Soph also has an interest in magic. Rudius proclaims himself the teacher of Soph now, and he will teach him magic. They play around till sundown, and Rudius finally goes home. Here we see a picture of Soph's family. This is actually the only shot we will get of them in the entire anime. Rudius gets home and his father is there waiting for him. He does not look happy at all. He tells Rudy that he is upset with him. Paul tells him that he is upset because apparently he got a complaint from a parent that he had beat up her son. Rudy now understands the situation. The bullies that he beat up went and told on his parents. We as the audience know that Rudy did nothing wrong. However, that is not the case for his father. Paul, who is worried that he may not be a good enough father, finally gets to act like a dad. Rudy tries to defend himself. However, Paul screams at him, not letting him do it at all. Now, remember that Rudy is significantly older than his parents mentally, and so here he decides this is a good time to educate his father, and so Rudy tries to talk down on Paul, telling him how he's taking advantage of his power as a father to just bully a kid. However, this only makes Paul angry and he ends up hitting Rudy. Rather than lose his cool, Rudy remains calm and collected. He tells Paul about how he's always tried his best to be a good son, so why is he getting treated this way? Why does he not have his father's trust? You see, Rudy sort of sees this world as a video game. In video games, you have a really good bond with someone, they'll usually side with you regardless of the situation. However, Paul did the opposite of what a video game character would do and ended up hitting his son, who has never done anything wrong before, in a heat of anger. I believe this caught Rudius off guard, and so Rudius decides to mock Paul. Earlier in the episode, Rudius said he wanted to keep up the Grey Rat name and bring honor to it. He sort of shares the same sentiment here, saying about how he'll keep carrying on the name, and next time he sees somebody getting bullied, he will simply team up with the bullies to jump the victim. And when he's old enough to leave home, he will no longer carry the Grey Rat name because he would be too embarrassed by the behavior Paul defends. Paul finally apologizes, says that he is wrong, and lets Rudy explain himself. Another thing about this scene I feel a lot of people ignore is that this actually boosts Rudy's self-confidence. Up until now, everything has really gone Rudy's way, and he feels like he can sort of manipulate things around them. I personally think the ego boost he gets around his parents is a bit bad for him. This will only make Rudy more egotistical, which I'm sure will bite him in the butt later in the story. Paul reflects on how he was looking forward to finally being a father and lecturing his son, and how he only meant to scold him a little. However, he almost ended up asking him to leave leave the house. He reflects on how when his father told him something very similar, he actually ended up leaving his house. With this, I can only assume that Paul was probably erased by being hit, and that is why he ended up doing the same thing to Rudy. One day he probably got enough of his father and he ended up leaving his home after a big fight. But hey, that's only an assumption, so feel free to take that with a grain of salt. So we have a slight time skip. Rudy and his best friend Self keep training. Apparently the bullies come to still bother them from time to time, but Rudy can deal with it quite easily. The bully's mom also keeps coming to lecture his father. However, at this point he's starting to feel like the mom of the bully has a crush on his dad. Since it's been some time since Rudy and Self started training, Rudy starts to realize some things about Self. Just how he raised his mana cap, he's also raising Self's mana cap by training from a young age. Also, Self asks Rudy to teach him silent spellcasting. Rudy has a bit of difficulty explaining it, but he does, and so Self goes out to try it. Rudy starts reflecting on some things here. If Self can also raise his mana like he can, and he can also do incantationless magic, then that would make him not special at all. If Self can do everything Rudy is good, then that means he got zero advantages on this world. He would not be the main character. And so he secretly hopes that Self cannot do incantationless magic. However, as he looks forward towards his student, he quickly finds out that Self has already mastered incantationless magic. And he finally comes to the realization he is nothing special in this world. All he has is his knowledge. After they play around for a while, Rudius reflects on how he used to actually have a childhood friend back in his past life. She was a girl and he was into her. However, she was not into him. And let's just say that he never really got over her.
And by that he means that he would still touch himself to the idea of her even after she got married.
Yeah, anyways, it starts raining and they both run to Rudius' home. I suppose it was closer than Self's home. And now they're ready to take a shower together. Since they're both boys, it won't be that awkward. However, even though Rudius is naked, he notices that Self is not taking off his clothing. He brings up how Self cannot take a shower while being fully clothed. Self agrees and he starts trying to take off his clothing very slowly. So rather than waiting, Rudius helps Self take his clothing off and he takes off his top. However, he quickly realizes that Self still needs to take off his shorts. So he slowly comes down and... oh yeah, while you're down there, remember to hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying this video and want to see more videos like it. It really helps the channel. Thank you very much. He pulls down Self shorts and Self punches him in the face. Not very strong though. Self still has their undergarments on. Rudius comes to the conclusion that the reason Self is so embarrassed about taking off their undergarments is because they're embarrassed about their weird looking penis. As someone who was stripped naked and taken pictures of, definitely relates to being embarrassed about their privates. Self makes his final stand and yells at Rudy, "No, you will not take off my undergarments," and so Rudy accepts. He walks away and tells him that he's gonna have to change clothing later. Self agrees and then Rudius quickly turns around and pulls down Self's underwear. And by looking very closely between Self's legs, he realizes that Self is not a man. Self is a woman. Or a girl, I guess. Self starts full ugly crying, and Rudius just stands there in shock. Rudius ends up taking a bath with his father. Paul finally gets to have his fatherly moment with his child. He reminds himself that he will not go off the deep end this time and he will try to listen to Rudius. Rudy finds out Self's name is actually Selfiette. Rudius gives him some fatherly advice and takes Rudy to apologize. Selfie. Paul reflects on how he thinks Rudy is a very smart boy and he's probably going to be okay on his own from here on out. However, Rudy ends up telling Selfie that the reason he thought she was a boy was because she looked like one, and you know, you don't say that to a girl. So she starts crying again. And Paul realizes that Rudy is also an idiot. While training with his father in the way of the sword, Paul offers some advice. Now that Rudius knows how smart Paul can be when it comes to women, he begs for the advice. And so we finally have a balance where Rudius and Paul can learn from each other. Paul ends up giving Rudius some really good advice. However, something that Rudius was not expecting was that Selfie was standing right behind them. So Paul encourages Rudy to go talk to Selfie. Rudy walks up to Selfie and rather than being genuine, he tries a really cheesy pickup line, that kind of stuff that sort of worked on Roxy earlier. However, it doesn't really work on Selfie. So he tries being genuine and explain how he feels. But he's scared Selfie doesn't like him anymore. However, Selfiette is a very mature character, even for her age. She ends up telling Rudy that all she wants is for things to go back on how they used to be. And so they make up. It was very important for this story for Rudius to think that Selfie was a boy. There wasn't this weird ploy to romanticize this girl and marry her or something like that. No, he genuinely became friends with Selfiette. They had many things in common and they just got along. This is much better in my opinion than if he knew she was a girl and he was just trying to flirt with her or something. Paul realizes that he's been helping his 6-year-old son pick up women and kind of feels slightly ashamed of himself, and the episode closes there. This episode is easily one of my favorite episodes. It shows how much Mushoku Tensei can do with just words. It doesn't need action. Character development and progression was through the roofs in this episode. Regardless, thank you so much for watching towards the end. I know not everybody makes it this far, so thank you if you did. Please drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to see more videos videos like this one, and I'll see you next time. Also, please follow me on twitch.tv/slyperformer so you can catch my live streams and just come talk with me. I'd really appreciate that since I still peak out at around 5 viewers. Thank you very much.